The one thing that I have learned from my almost 10 years in the fashion industry is that starting a fashion brand is not about having a lot of money, connections, or years of experience and skills in design or business. It's about understanding the fundamental principles of starting fashion brands and consistently executing, prioritizing, and focusing on those principles. It sounds simple, but for some reason, fashion schools fail to teach this. Because of this, I decided to start a fashion brand startup consulting group so that you can finally learn how to start a fashion brand in 6 months with a low budget, no social connections, and no designer business skills. For just $97 per month, you will have access to a private coaching group that includes the following. Firstly, a step-by-step video training guide on how to start your fashion brand in 6 months with clear, concise, and easy to follow steps. Secondly, you will also get 24 hours a day, 7 days a week access to personalized coaching and feedback from me personally. And thirdly, weekly video coaching calls so that you can learn and network not only with myself, but with other fellow fashion entrepreneurs. As you guys know, this podcast is completely self-funded, so all of the money made will be used to create better and more content. If you want to join the Fashion Brand Startup Consulting Group for just $97 per month, the link will be in the description of this episode. I really look forward to getting to know you, what you are working on, and what you want to create. Now, let's continue with the episode. Building the fashion businesses of the future together. Welcome to the future of fashion business. The future of fashion business is about helping aspiring fashion entrepreneurs and designers start their own successful fashion brands by learning from the best, most experienced people in the industry. Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the future of fashion business. I'm your host, Esteban Julian. On this week's episode, I sat down with fashion editor Nathalie Theodosi. Now, this was a very, very interesting episode that gives a very, very unique perspective on the reality of and the current state of fashion editorial. Now, it doesn't matter if you're in fashion or other creative disciplines. The editorial space of any industry is a very, very important part of developing yourself as a creative, developing yourself as a designer, developing yourself as a business owner, because of just the huge role that editorials play in the creative scene. But editorials have been going through a very, very big shift in the last sort of 5 years to a decade because of social media. Social media, as you guys are aware, has changed everything, and it's changed a lot of different things within creative industries that a lot of people are not very, very familiar with. And having somebody like Nathalie give us a run on not only how her entire process developed, how she got started into editorials, and just her personal perspective on what the current state of the industry is, what the problems are, how the industry looks like, and is probably going to, what direction is the industry going to go to in the future? What are the problems? What are the good things, et cetera, et cetera. It's just a lot of really, really good insight that a lot of people can use to get an understanding of such an important part of the industry, because it is very important. And to be honest with you, my personal opinion on editorials in general is that they are just waiting to be disrupted. There's a lot of problems that need to be solved from an insider's perspective. And this is not only me saying it from an outsider's perspective, but also Nathalie saying it from an insider's perspective. That will give people a lot of really unique insight on how this industry actually works. So you can leverage that just for their personal curiosity, their personal understanding, or they can leverage that to either get a job in editorial or pursue a creative or professional and entrepreneurial career, understanding such an important facet of creative industries in general. So that said, this episode was incredible. Really, really good insight from an insider in the editorial space about the current stage of editorial, the problems, the good things, and when the industry is going, where the industry is probably going to go to in the future. That said, let's get into the episode.
Awesome, Nathalie. By the way, Theodosi, that is, I'm going to say, your accent sounds Italian. I don't think you're Italian, though.
It's close enough. I'm Greek.
Greek. I was gonna say it's either from Greek, Cyprus, or Italian, but yeah. Okay, awesome. And tell us a little bit more about yourself, Nathalie, for people that are not aware of who you are and what you do. Who is Nathalie Theodosi?
Excellent. Greek accent, first of all. But yeah, as my name suggests, I am Greek Cypriot, and I've grown up until I was 18 years old in a very small island of Cyprus. So it was a very sort of sheltered, easygoing childhood, very far away from the world of fashion in a way. I had a mother and a grandmother that I enjoyed dressing up and loved clothes, but I never really understood what the fashion industry really is, or even that there is a job that is fashion journalism and that I could do it, until I spoke to a friend of my mom's who lived in New York, and he worked across the creative industries, and told me, you like languages, you like literature. I was always sort of drawn to humanities subjects, and that this is a job that you should do. And from then on, it was sort of set in my mind that this makes a lot of sense. It's exactly what I want to do. And I moved to London at 18 years old, studied French and English literature, and then just was on a mission to become a fashion journalist and get a job in magazines. So I, like everyone else, did a bunch of internships, wrote a blog, practiced my writing alone, all of that. And over time, I first landed a job at Net-a-Porter as a copywriter. That was my first sort of entry into the fashion system. And then I got a full-time position at Women's Wear Daily as a reporter, and then more senior editor, which is where I am now as well after 6 years.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. And how did you find your way into journalism specifically? Because I think a lot of people, especially coming from your background, and I can relate because I was born in a small city in Mexico, like mm-hmm. the same challenges of just not being able to think about fashion or creative industries as a career is something that I relate with. But when you come from a background like that, it's very difficult to sort of find, it's not only difficult to first understand that it's a reality for you, but secondly, what your place in that industry is, because there's so many options first, and everything looks so shiny and attractive: design, marketing, PR, editorials. So what actually got you into, the journalism part of the industry?
For me, I was drawn to the journalism part of the industry straight from the start, just because I loved writing and literature, reading. That's everything I loved doing at school. So journalism seemed closest to what I was good at and my natural interests. If anything, I didn't really understand the other functions of the industry, like PR, marketing, social media, design. Like those things were even more foreign to me. But being such an avid reader and loving writing so much, I was reading a lot of magazines or mm-hmm. whatever I could get in Cyprus. So journalism was a very obvious choice from the beginning. Mm-hmm. The getting in wasn't as linear and as obvious as you can imagine. But right. Yeah, I knew straight on, I was quite specific that I wanted to take on the journalism pathway. I did try doing a few internships in PR departments when I moved to London, but I also very quickly realized that that's not for me and I want to be a journalist.
Yeah. And I mean, you got in, what was it, early 2010s into the industry, right? Which is sort of the period where the unpaid fashion intern that was treated pretty much like a slave was still like part of the culture, right?
Yep. Fortunately or unfortunately, yeah. That was the time. And that means it is changing a little bit now, but I think it is still very much part of the culture of the fashion industry and fashion media specifically.
Yeah, it's very devil wears Prada sort of culture still, but even more back then, because I mean the editorials or the editors that I know usually had a very similar start that you had. They had to. I mean, people think that or have this expectation that if you want to get into editorials, and again, things might have changed now. I'm not very aware of how things are now, but back in the day, it used to be like you had to do. It wasn't 6 months or a year of internships. I mean, some people did 5 years of just continuous editorial internships just to get like a consistent job for a reputable magazine.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I mean, it's important to also recognize that for us and for me specifically, I had the privilege and the luxury to do those internships because I came from a background where my family was paying for me to be in London and have a few months here and there to get those internships. And for many other people, this is not an option at all, unless they have family in London or some other way. Or the way that they try to make it work is by working multiple jobs in the evening as well, living really far away, commuting, which is really horrible and difficult. And it's why the media is so whitewashed in a way, and not enough people from a variety of backgrounds make it into magazines.
Right. Yeah. So the economical barrier is quite high, and I do understand that, because I mean, especially if you want to get into the editorial scene, the top tier editorial scene. I mean, you're talking about New York, talking about London, talking about certain specific cities in Asia. I mean, you're talking about the most expensive cities in the world. And if you're not, for example, in London, I mean, in London, there's a lot of people from all over the place. If you're a European, you have the advantage of being able to have as you said, like a side job, which is probably going to be like retail while you figure stuff out. But if you come from a different background, you barely afforded to move to London, you barely afforded, to be able to be in university, being able to economically sustain that process is a very, very challenging thing. I think, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what a lot of people also do is they move back to their home cities, and they just do a lot of they just try to figure stuff out. They start their own blogs, they do their own work, and they continuously apply to these things until they actually get an opportunity. But I have heard that the barrier of entry for editorials is very, very, very high.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I mean, now with the pandemic, some internships have become remote, which has opened it up a little bit to people that are not living in London and can work from home, which means less expenses, less travel. You don't need to rent a place out in London or Milan or Paris to be able to get these jobs. But still, they are few and far between. And I really think that's one of the areas where there's a lot of work to be done in order to open the doors to more diverse talent to be able to come into magazines and to feel welcome to stay as well, because that's another problem.
Right. Awesome. And other than the advantage that you particularly have, because I think everybody has to sort of be very aware of what their situation is, what advantages they have and disadvantages they are, whether their background, the economical ability of their family, their talents, their character traits. So in your specific case, because I mean, even if you had, the economical support for some time to be able to land these internships in the first place, I mean, it's very rare for people to get, the opportunities of internship at the companies that you had. I mean, you pretty much intern at the best, most reputable magazines out there. So what would you say was the specific advantage or a specific talent that you brought to the table that made those opportunities present themselves to you? Was it a specific skill? Was it a specific character trait? Was it you were good at networking? Like, what would you say that was for you? Or was it just like being at the right place at the right time?
Probably a combination of a lot of those things that you mentioned. I mean, I came to London with zero connections, and that's one thing that they tell you, that if you don't know someone, you will never be able to get in. But I really, really tried from, I think, year one of university, every summer to just blindly send emails, to ask friends of friends of friends if they know someone, and to look on any job postings that I could find online. And eventually I started sort of finding a way in like this. And I mean, hundreds of emails that had never gone answered, sending them constantly and trying. I felt like I was on I wanted it so badly that I was on a mission. Mm-hmm. And I think that was probably one advantage. And also I knew that interning means getting coffees and doing lots of really unpleasant jobs. And I really, really didn't mind. And I almost thought that was a privilege as long as I could be in that room. So I was really going above and beyond, whether it was like cleaning the trash in a magazine office, carrying bags of clothes up and down all around London instead of them, paying for couriers. I became their human courier for months, being the first one to come in, the last person to leave, all of that. So I think a really strong work ethic in a way helped a lot. And yeah, it was just, I think, and this is, I realized in hindsight that I wanted it so badly that, and it was almost, I was on a mission to make it happen, and I kept trying to find ways. And even when there were sort of no connections, no obvious connections, my initial emails to editors were going unanswered. I just kept trying until someone eventually said yes.
And when that happened, I mean, you still had the curriculum, right? Like you still had your own projects to show, you still had something to show this person, right? You weren't just pursuing this opportunity without having something to back it up when it happened.
Yeah, I mean, I was writing a blog, it was around the time that blogs were sort of emerging, and I never took it the way that some really smart people did, like, you know, the early generation of bloggers like Brian Boy and all those people, they really went the blogging route. I wasn't interested in that. I just wanted to practice my writing, but it did mean that I got a lot of practice by writing every day, and I had a portfolio of work to show that I had created myself. And I also, when I was studying for my master's, I did it specifically in fashion journalism at the London College of Fashion. Again, I was even when it wasn't a school assignment, I kept writing on a daily basis to practice as much as I can, build a portfolio. I offered sort of to young websites that were just launching at the time to write for free for them. And I was also reading a lot, anything and everything on WWD, on the Business of Fashion, all the Vogues. I was following all the editors on Instagram. I knew everyone's name, everyone's title, where they were going, what they cared about, all of that. So, and I think that also helped a lot, because when I went into those internships, if they said, oh, who is that person that, I don't know, is good with print design from Italy, I knew the designer they were talking about. So I could sort of pitch in conversations, and they could realize that I know my stuff, and I could contribute something. So yeah, I think a combination of all of those things helped, that even when I did make it in, eventually, not everywhere, I was not welcomed in every magazine office, far from it, but in some cases, some editors sort of saw that I had things to offer, that I was very knowledgeable, and that I could have potential, I guess.
And back when you started, because I'm guessing things have been changing a lot recently in that industry, which we'll ask you a lot more about further in the conversation. But back when you started, what would you say was the most important factor that determined your ability to, you know, get your foot in the door? Was it, and genuinely, was it connections? Was it the skills and the talent? Like if you had to just put your eggs all in one basket, which one would you say, like back in the day, was the most important factor if you wanted to get your foot in the door?
I didn't have connections, so it was definitely not the connections. I wouldn't say even if it had anything to do with talent, because they never really saw anything except from a basic CV, and you never got to really write until much later down the line. So I would say it's more the biggest thing was perseverance, a big work ethic, and also the fact that I had the privilege and to be in London for those 3 years of my university years, and to stay a little bit longer in the summers and do those internships.
Right. Okay. Interesting. And there was the persistence to create the opportunity, pretty much. But what I'm trying to figure out is how the dynamics work, because it works differently for different parts of the industry. There's certain parts of the industry where, you know, talent is a lot more productive than necessarily a lot, maybe connections. There's some areas where persistence is very productive. But, you know, a lot of ways that persistent is just a way to create those connections, you know? And again, I don't want to place a lot of importance of connections, because I think a lot of people think that fashion is all about connections when it really isn't. Most people that get those connections eventually start in a place very similar to how you started, with zero I started in the exact same way, 0 friends, nobody, no nothing. But nowadays, I think that you are sort of in the position that a lot of people were in when you were trying to put your foot into the door. So in hindsight, or nowadays, you putting yourself in the position that others were, like the other people are trying to reach, like what are some factors that you'll look for, you know, identifying if somebody has, I guess, potential, because I think that's the right word.
Yeah. I mean, we do recruit interns all the time, and then sometimes more junior writers. So what I would look for, it's someone getting in touch, and obviously at the right, I try to look at everything, but also persisting if I don't catch it, if it doesn't catches my attention straight away, to keep following up. There is a fine balance, of course. You know, you can't drive someone crazy. You need to give the editor you are contacting some room to respond. But someone that sends a nice, well-written, polite email with just short, to the point, about what they want to get out of the internship, what they can bring to the table. And it doesn't matter where they're studying, what kind of background. Sometimes not even experience matters that much, because they will get to do. They start with basic tasks, and
with the coffee,
we can train them up. Not so much coffee, like, but you know, interview transcription, some research, a little bit in pieces like this that you can train someone to learn how to do. So I think all you need is that persistence to email, to find the right people, because there's also situations where, you know, someone that wants to work at a glossy consumer publication will email me, and I'm a sort of a editor at a B2B publication, and it's clear that it's not a good fit, and it's a waste of both our time. So I think it's finding the right people to contact, knowing why you would be a good fit, and just showing a great work ethic, flexibility with your time, and, you know, the willingness to learn and to help out. It's not about connections, and it's definitely not about your background or how many degrees you have or anything like that.
Interesting. Very interesting. Yeah. And I mean, also the timing that is dictated by that persistence, you know, because people think that persistence is all about staying top of mind. And yes, but you need to understand that a lot of times, and I've experienced this a lot myself, because I have a sales background. A lot of the time it's not that the opportunity is not for you, but the time is just not right. Maybe they're not looking for that specific opportunity. So that persistence, what it creates is, for when the opportunity presents itself, when they actually need somebody like you, you're still there. You're not forgotten, because that happens all the time, right? Like, I mean, I can just imagine the amount of people that try and get in touch with you, and you're interested, they're persistent, they have good work. There's resonance, but timing's not right. So 6 months go by, you have forgotten all about them. And then there's probably this one guy that just sent you the email at the right time. And all these factors also fit in with what we're looking for at this particular moment in time. So yeah,
absolutely. And to sort of counterbalance that, it's, if you do make yourself available, and or remind the person that you're interested every couple of months, if the timing wasn't right in the beginning. But at the same time, you also need to let go at some point, and trust timing, I think, because excessive chasing is also not the answer, I would say.
Okay, interesting. And how do the dynamics, because this is obviously more for people that they're trying to get their door in the industry, but how do the dynamics change for people that want to get features? Is it a very similar dynamic, or it works in a completely different way?
You mean designers,
people that want to showcase their products in their editorial? Yeah.
I think it is quite similar, in the sense that you should be proactive, reach out to the right people, do your research about who the editors that you should be reaching out to are, and why they fit you and your brand, not just send random emails to a bunch of people. Be more selective. And yeah, it could be, like you say, that timing means that I might be working on a story that person is perfect for, and just like that, in one day they get a feature, or that it takes 6 months. But as long as they check in every couple of months, and the way they pitch themselves, and the story is not too sort of pushy, I would say, it can work. And of course, in this case, connections like we maybe matter for a lot more if a PR that I have an existing relationship with, and I trust their taste and their knowledge, comes to me with a new brand or a new concept or a new idea. It is natural, I think, that there's I will pay attention more because there's an existing relationship there. I know their name when it pops up in my inbox. But there have been many times as well that someone emailed me who I didn't know, but I found interesting, and stories came out. It's also to do with being out there, because you can meet people at events, at dinners, at even online events, and these things these days. And out of simple conversations, ideas can come up, and then stories from those ideas. But I think it's important just to go into those things, contact someone, email them, or even chat to them at an event without specific expectations, and without sort of pushing your agenda and your personal interests too much.
Right.
To just present your idea, who you are, and leave the other person to decide if it's a good fit for them, and when.
Okay. And would you say the nature of editorial is more consumer based, or is it more about innovating? Because I think it's kind of confusing how the business model works for a lot of people. Would you say that editorial is more about understanding who the customer, the magazine readers are, and what they're looking to learn more about, or what they're interested in? Or is it more about understanding who they are and what they want, but still nonetheless doing something and presenting them something and information and news that it might not be supported by market feedback, yet you guys know what you should be pushing? Did that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's really interesting. And I think it's probably a balance between those two things. In the same way, designers, a designer does need to think about the practical needs of their customer, right? And what they need to wear. But at the same time, the best designers also sort of can foresee what people want and offer them something new. And that's how innovation happens. You need both. You need an understanding of people's needs and their day-to-day realities, in the same way, which is why during the pandemic, designers were not giving us ball gowns, they were giving us tracksuits. But at the same time, you need some innovation and something new, and something unexpected to surprise people. And I think editorial should have the same approach. Sometimes we get too caught up into what the industry says or what we think is cool in our little fashion bubble, and forget that there's a reader at the end, and then that's who we need to be listening to the most, and understanding what they care about and what they want to read. But yes, at the same time, as journalists and as reporters, we should be out there looking at how trends are evolving, speaking to people, looking ahead, basically, and also telling people things that they might not expect, and what the latest innovations are, what's coming next. It should be a balance between the two, for sure.
Okay, interesting. And what is your personal process? What does your personal process look like? And it might be completely intuitive and at this point and just natural, but if you were trying to pinpoint what your process looks like what is it? Is it first you try to understand the market, what they're looking for, who your reader is, and then you try to sort of balance that with your personal interests? How does it work for you? What's your personal process?
To be honest, I try as much as I can to leave my personal interests out the
Out of
door.
it. Right.
And then really get an understanding of the market, because even if it's something that personally I might not be drawn to, but there is a potential and audience interest there, it's still important. But yeah, it's really understanding the market, talking to as many interesting people as possible, reading, and not just reading fashion news and sources and following the fashion world, but pop culture, art, politics, all of that, and having sort of a broader context and a broader understanding of what's going on in the world. And developing relationships with brands that I find interesting and which are doing interesting things, and following them closely and then their developments. So yeah, it's a mix of things, and sometimes I get a lot of things pitched to me, and there it's just about developing a sense of judgment about what's newsworthy, what's not, what a reader would be interested in reading, and what's really not. And I really try to sway from writing stories that it's just to benefit a brand's marketing agenda, and no one would really care to read. But it's also reading and having conversations with people, understanding what's going on, and writing those bigger features and analyses that connect the dots between what's going on, and that just comes from conversations and
just being very immersed in just culture in general, from politics to social problems to the inside of the industry. Okay, very interesting. And I mean, was that something that always came easy to you? Because I can imagine it being a very, very difficult discipline to leave yourself out of the entire equation, especially in the fashion scene where a lot of people are highly, highly creative. Was it something that came easy for you to just being very, very pragmatic and rational in terms of what the job required and leaving your personal interests out of it? Or was it something that you developed over time? How did that process look like?
Yeah, I think that part is something that does come quite naturally to me. I think it's why I chose to be a journalist. I'm much more interested in telling other people's stories rather than, me, and having attention on myself. Or if anything, that makes me feel a lot more a lot less comfortable. So that's something, I guess it's also to do with my character and my personality. I'm a little bit more introverted, so leaving myself out of the door and focusing really on what's going on in the world, what's going on in the market, the story of the person I'm talking to, is something that does come quite naturally, and it's a requirement, I think, when you are a reporter. If anything, it's the other part of the job is having certain opinions for different types of stories or reviews and things like that, and that is what took me a little bit longer. At first, I just was focused on reporting, the facts and what's going on around me, before putting myself in, and it took me some time to really develop my skills and my confidence and my own opinions. And then I started, I think, also putting a bit of myself into my work sometimes, and expressing opinions, and adding a little bit more of my taste into the brands that I pick, the stories that the brands that we shoot sometimes for certain issues, and being more curated in a way. And I think it's good to approach it that way and not have too many opinions from the beginning, because the more you learn, the better informed your opinions are, and the more confident you feel. While if you do that when you're really at your early stages, you probably end up saying something you regret or doing something you regret.
Very interesting. Yeah. So you found it a lot more productive to be impartial in terms of your approach to editorial.
Yeah.
Okay. And do you find that being an industry standard though, Do you think that applies to all editors? Do you think mostly editors have this tendency to be impartial, or there's editors that sort of found their way in terms of expressing themselves, yet at the same time leveraging that expression through other people's stories?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's an industry standard at all. I think, I mean, and I was quite lucky being trained in a place like Women's Wear Daily, where they are very true to reporting standards and to being, you know, quite impartial, always exploring both sides of the argument, letting the reader make their own conclusions. So that was also part of my training. But especially in this day and age, I think, of the personal brand, if anything, we're moving a lot further away from this sort of really proper impartial reporting and to this sort of, this is what I think, this is me, from a lot of self-promotion, a lot of op-eds, without really always at least the knowledge or the experience or the research to back that up, because it's very easy to make big statements, to make big claims, either on social media or with an article, but you should only be making them if you've done your research, if you have the knowledge and the background to back what you're saying up. Anyone can go online and say things, but I think there's still value to seeing both sides, and to also letting your readers, presenting both sides, maybe hinting at your opinion, but letting the reader make their own conclusions, which is not as common now in journalism as it used to be, and journalistic standards are not kept as high as in the past, because of the pace of the internet and all the changes that are happening in the media, I guess.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit more about why that is, or why do you think that is?
I think it's, like I said, the pace of online media has
speed always what's the word I'm trying for? Speed always pushes irrationality and impartial behavior. Yeah, absolutely.
So when you need to be pushing out content so quickly, it's much easier not to, speak to 5 different sources, or just to explore the one side and not bother to call the people on the opposing side to see what they have to say. I think people are under a lot of pressure to deliver volume and certain amount of views and traffic numbers and all that. So that automatically means that you have to sacrifice on certain standards and journalistic practices. And also social media and algorithms really, really value sensationalism. So it's much easier to make a big sensational statement or use something clickbait than write something that has
genuine
and is a little bit less sensational and more balanced. So I think, like everything else in every single industry, social media and the internet is the biggest reason that journalism is so different and so changed in the last year. And I probably sound 100 years old, but I'm not.
Well, I mean, but even if you started 10 years ago, I mean, you've probably been through one of the, if not probably the most important event in history, and when it comes to journalism, which was the rise of social media. So, I mean.
Yeah. And I've only worked in digital media, but I think I can still see how it's affecting, and it's everything that we do, and then the pressures that journalists working online especially have to sort of face with because there's a new set of expectations now. It's not let me write the best story, but let me write a story with the most views. So immediately the standard, the way you're going to write it, what you're going to write about transforms completely.
Yeah. The value behind it is Okay, that's very, very interesting. I mean, I can understand the consequences of doing that because you see it all the time in the news, right? That's why a lot of people don't like watching the news anymore. But it's very clearly what the consequences are when, you know, the news channels in the world, the CNNs, the newspapers are affected by this, I guess, irrationality. But when it comes to fashion magazines, what do you think the consequences of promoting that editorial behavior are and will be in the long term?
I mean, with many, I would say it's just a loss of quality and of more sort of intelligent, intellectual concept.
Opportunity as well, maybe.
I dare say, and yeah, opportunities. Like there's a lot more if now you go into any fashion magazine, especially online, there's a lot more about what Kim Kardashian and Dua Lipa and Hailey Bieber are wearing rather than sort of those more analytical pieces and long form writing and those kind of things. So we're moving more towards that because those kind of stories mean clicks and likes and higher
revenue
numbers. So and of course, fashion magazines are businesses. They have goals and then KPIs that they need to reach. So it makes sense, and it's not, people are not necessarily to blame, but that is what's happening. But I think we need to find a better balance and not underestimate the intelligence of our readers. I don't think people of any age, from whether they are Gen Z or 90 years old, want to read just about celebrity outfits. They do want to discuss, you know,
discover,
I don't know, the cultural significance of a trend, issues in the industry, all of those other things as well. And it's worth really spending that extra time and effort to write those quality pieces as well, I think, as well as, you know, some fun, lighthearted, easier content too.
Wow, that's super, super interesting. And how difficult have you found your personal developing in that sort of environment? Because I mean, whether you like it or not, it affects you, right? It affects the way that you work. It affects the way that you have passion for what you do. So, how has it affected you personally?
Yeah, to be fair, I have been quite lucky working for a business-focused publication for 99% of my career, that I never had to be immersed into that part of the fashion world where it's all about, you know, fast trends, celebrity coverage and all that. And that's why I have been so focused on the B2B side of things and business reporting and all that, and I've found that it suits me much more. But still, working in digital media, it affects everyone. And what I have been trying to do is, like I said, just strike a balance. I don't think there's anything wrong with more lighthearted content. I just try to remind myself not to underestimate the intelligence of the readers. And yes, sometimes we just want to read something that's 300 words and light, and I can do those things as well, or some quick news about what's going on in the industry. But I really do try to really look at what's happening, to raise issues, to write longer pieces, longer interview pieces or profiles with designers, even if they are under the radar and they're small, if they have something really interesting to say. And also another big part of my work the last few years has been covering sustainability. And it's actually something that, while it's quite geeky and technical, there's a lot of interest around it and a lot of growing interest as well, which goes to show that, yeah, there are audiences that are still looking for quality, fact-based, impartial journalism. So yeah, I have shifted a lot of focus on that area as well. And covering everything from, I don't know, textile innovation to some of the key sustainability conferences concerning the fashion industry, raising issues around waste, the future of fashion weeks, all of those conversations. I think there's a lot of interest there, and it's also something a lot more intellectually stimulating and interesting for both myself, but also the people reading my work.
And superficially, which tend to be the sort of articles that get the most attention? Is it purely celebrity based? Is it new fashion shows? Like what's the because I think you've talked about it's easy to understand what content with substance and what the value is, but what about the other one that is maybe not so deep value, but it drives that volume?
I think coverage of all the big shows, that of all the mega brands that everyone knows and loves is something that always has
it's like a proven formula.
Yeah, it's a proven formula. There's always it's enduring interest. If we write about, when I was writing about the Dior men's show that just happened in London,
Balenciaga recently.
When McQueen came to London and then did presented there's this thing was spring 2022 in East London for the first time. All of those stories get a lot of clicks and likes and interest. And another thing, which is, I think, something in between light content with a little bit of data and more of a smart take on what's going on, is also trends and why they're there, what's selling, and people love numbers as well. So if we have data on I don't know, the latest Balenciaga sneaker that has been selling out and how much of it has been selling or how quickly and why. So we work with a lot of sort of data companies, shopping search engines and things like that give us the data, and we sort of pull interesting
just communicate it.
Figures and numbers that show what's selling, what's not, who's the biggest trendsetter, things like this. And at the moment it looks like it's all the sort of Netflix shows, like from Emily in Paris to Squid Games. And people love to, I think, understand and pick why they're buying what they're buying or who's buying what and all that.
And has it always been so, or that has happened recently?
I think it's always been so, but more recently we've got a lot more data to and new ways of understanding those trends and consumer behavior. So it's a lot more numbers focused now, given that a lot of our shopping is online. We are always searching for things on Google, so we can analyze consumer behavior using those facts and figures a lot more now.
Okay. And would you say this, everything that we're talking about, this sort of dissonance between, the faster pace of the editorial industry, which, compromises quality for speed and revenue, is the biggest problem that you've seen happen in the industry in the last 10 years that you've been in it? Or are there any other big problems that you either see right now happening or see coming?
I think there's quite a few problems in the media industry, without sounding like very negative. I think what we spoke about, compromising quality and the really extra fast speed of things is one of the big ones, especially relating to digital media and the world of online. But I think the other big thing is also sort of behind the scenes, who gets access and how they're being treated once they get access. Like we laugh about The Devil Wears Prada, but when it comes down to it, there's really not anything funny about it. And there's a reason why those stereotypes are there. I don't think they're as bad as they used to be. And maybe part of it is sensationalized and exaggerated, but a lot of it is true. And I think there needs to be a better code of conduct. People need to behave themselves better and treat people with more kindness, as simple as that, all across the industry, not just in media. So we need better structures in a way to monitor those things, because up until recently, there wasn't even like proper HR departments that could, overlook offices and sort of troubleshoot those kind of issues, or ensure that people feel safe to make complaints, to raise problems. And also budgets obviously are being cut. People, like, positions are being constantly eliminated, and people are overworked and underpaid. And I think there needs to be a really big overhaul in
culture.
Yeah, in the culture in general, how budgets are being divided, because there's a big a big gap between sort of senior editors and junior members of staff, which are being paid below minimum wage sometimes, which is absolutely unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. And we need salary transparency, and there needs to be more value placed on people, rather than, I don't know, spending all your budget on a shoot, on traveling to do a shoot in an exotic location, or paying for a supermodel to be on your cover,
right?
But not paying your people that are working 15 hours a day from 7 a.m. until late at night. So I think that sort of human element needs to, and the culture of media really, really needs to change, with also stricter boundaries being placed between the personal and the professional, because I mean, in the past it was completely blended. It's still quite blended, and I think it would be a lot healthier if there was a stricter divide.
Right. Okay, that's interesting. And what I find very interesting is that's a problem that the industry has always had at least for a very, very long time. And obviously they've done nothing about it. But I guess looking at it from a business perspective, I mean, businesses like that won't act unless they have an incentive to do so, right? So, I mean, what are really the bad things about that is obviously the emotional challenges, the pressure that people have to go through when they're working in that sort of culture and environment. But I guess that the reason why businesses haven't changed in such a long time is because other than that, there really isn't any incentive for them to change, right? Like there hasn't been, the transparency of the reality of the situation. There hasn't been, again, an incentive for them to do something about it.
Yeah. No, there hasn't been. And for so many years, it was almost sort of, the attitude was that this is how it is. This is the rite of passage. You have to go through years of being broke and treated like shit. So
emotionally destroyed
and more bullied because it's a privilege to work in fashion to begin with. It's just an unwritten rule that this is what it is, and everyone needs to accept it if they want to be part of it. But I feel like there are business incentives, maybe not very obvious.
Of course, not superficial. Of course.
You wouldn't get such a high turnover of people, and you would have more loyal teams, more productive teams, more creative teams if you treated your people better as a company, I think. And you would get better content if you had a more diverse group of editorial staff with different perspectives and different experiences to bring to the table. And maybe that would mean your magazine stays relevant and isn't in danger of folding and losing advertising revenue all the time. So there are a lot of business opportunities. They're just not obvious, so people don't act on them, right. I think. And but right now, I think there is an obvious business incentive that people are afraid of being called out. And I mean, they should be doing it for better reasons, not from fear of being called out. But I mean, if it does the trick,
if it does it,
and I applaud everyone who does it. And I think that the younger generation is much more
Incentivized.
vocal and less accepting of this sort of abuses. So
behavior.
it's good.
Yeah, it's very interesting, and I think I mean it's interesting to think about it because I mean I don't know how I don't understand the culture obviously, but I think it's as you say, it's very hard to do those types of changes when you're in an industry that is just moved by speed, and just figuring out what you have to do tomorrow to hit the quarters goals for the next quarter. And improving culture it's such a long-term sort of I guess vision or improvement. It's not a short-term thing. I mean, you need to reestablish the culture of companies that are made up of thousands and thousands of people and years of that type of behavior. That it's very difficult. If they don't get pushed enough to make that change. If there's no as you said, if there's no almost like literal social movement to make those type of changes, it's going to be very, very hard for it to happen from one day to the next, unless there's like, there's a clear sign that is an opportunity from a business perspective. Because I feel that's one of the biggest issues that happens with editorials is that, I mean, the consumers, there's this dissonance, right, between how the companies operate from a culture perspective and how consumers operate and value things. Consumers in our industry tend to be very open to positive experiences. They tend to be highly empathetic, and there is this need to be congruent with what your consumers are looking for and who they are from a values perspective, from a philosophical perspective. And that's becoming increasingly more important because of social media. Because back in the day, again, it can be 10 years ago, there was this, like, there wasn't this bridge connecting the two things. The only bridge was the product that they were serving, and companies can manipulate that with ease, right? Like, could readers hate that we are for specific social movement? Oh, we'll just put articles that say that we're not, and whatever. We don't have to adapt our culture to what they require. But now those two things are starting to become a lot more connected. That's very interesting. I mean, it's a ticking time bomb, to be honest with you, by how the world is working right now. I mean, it'll eventually happen. It's just specific event or specific something that will eventually make that take place. Absolutely. Wow, that's very interesting. Very interesting.
And I think the events of the last 2 years especially have sort of started to set the wheel, get the wheels rolling, and changes are slowly happening. I had a much more optimistic vision that once we came out of lockdown and the industry was restarting, I would see much bigger changes straight away, given that we went through such an intense traumatic event. I don't think that's the case. I think there's a big group of people and a lot of the big companies that just want to go back to business as usual. But I think eventually there's also now this growing group that will not take anything apart from positive change. And I really hope that they keep going and become more and more vocal and eventually sort of take over in a way. Obviously, it's quite utopic, but yeah, I think now we are dealing with these two sort of clashing forces of sort of good and bad, change and stay the same. And we need to see how it evolves.
That's interesting, because I mean, all the problems and the things that we've talked about in this episode so far are pretty much consequences of that behavior. Like, if you think about it, the lack of opportunity for up and coming designers is because of that culture. This mindset of prioritizing speed over quality is, again, a consequence of this culture. So it's funny how, I mean, at the end of the day, there's a lot of problems, or there might be problems with the industry, but solutions can happen in a very simple, not easy ways, of course. But it's funny to think that it almost all roots from culture problems when it comes to the editorial industry.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I mean, some of the solutions, like you say, are very simple. It can be as simple as be kind, treat people nice.
Treat your people that work for you well, yeah.
give your employees a raise if they deserve it at the end of the year. Open up your hiring process. Look outside your usual sort of connections and sources when you're hiring people or commissioning people. Take a bit more time to develop that long-term vision to change culture. It is time and effort and a bit of willingness, but I mean, we spend a lot of time and effort on other more superficial things, whether it's like fashion week outfits or which events are going from one event to another. So I don't see why not spend time in doing this. Yeah, I hope I'm not, it doesn't sound sort of too idealistic, but it's changes that really need to happen.
Awesome. Okay, and moving to a more positive topic now, because I mean, obviously, we don't want to, we don't want to ruin people's dreams, you know. I mean, every industry is like this. It doesn't matter if you're in the editorial part of fashion. I mean, when you're talking about industries of this scale and businesses and brands of this scale, there's going to be good and bad things. I mean, they're like people. They operate like people. They have specific philosophies and counterproductive behaviors, and people have things that they're really good at and things that you need to be admired for, and things that, you know, they're not as good, because it's human nature to just not be perfect in every single way. It's just the process of continuous improvement, whether it is as individuals or as corporations. Now, that said, what are some of the most positive things that you've seen happen in the industry?
There is a lot of those as well. Yeah, like you said, we shouldn't be all doom and gloom. I mean, there are some incredible new designers, the next generation of designers that is coming through in the last few years. And I mean, they are even more brave because they're doing it in the middle of a pandemic, of a very unstable economic situations, but they're still sort of launching their brands, fighting for change, coming out with these incredible creative collections. I mean, there's so many names that I can think about now, like people like Harris Reed, who has this mission for gender fluidity and is always fighting for change in the industry. Connor Ives, who is American designer based here in London. He'll be doing his debut show actually in London Fashion Week next month, and I'm really excited about it. And straight from the beginning, he's created this brand, and it's all about upcycling garments, not creating any waste. I'm going to Copenhagen Fashion Week next week, and even there is a lot of young brands that are creating sort of also very size inclusive clothing, knitted pieces that just stretch and can fit any body size. And they do that again using fabric leftovers from production runs that other brands do, or they do really limited runs and make sure that they're not wasting anything. So there is all this young generation of people, which is, you know, operating a lot more sustainably, raising issues like gender fluidity in the case of Harris Reed, and really having such strong set of values and ethics behind their brands. So it's not just, we're not just now looking at beautiful clothing, we are also being educated about, you know, tolerance and gender, sexuality, all of those things, culture. And there's a lot of innovation happening in tech as well, and the second-hand economy. I mean, in the last year, there was a lot of money being poured into resale and rental companies, and those are companies that are fully circular, and they are encouraging a completely new way of consuming. I'm a big fan of rental in particular. There's a company called By Rotation, which offers peer-to-peer rental, and it's stylish women around London who can rent their clothes to one another, make money along the way, and it's an alternative to buying fast fashion. You've got your designer piece for, I don't know, £20 from another girl in London, and then the founder is someone incredibly talented and intelligent, Ashita. She used to work in finance and now has built this fashion tech platform. So businesses like this give me a lot of hope that the industry will change. There's new ways of consumption. There's new ways of designing collections, like what Connor and Harris are doing with upcycling. And there's also a lot of activist voices that are making their way into fashion and really having open, honest conversations about the issues that are plaguing the industry and garment workers' rights and diversity on the runways and behind the scenes, all of those things. And I think now there's also very much more captive audience. They flag those things on social media. They're educating people and really creating these captive audiences who also now want to know what's going on behind the scenes in fashion, and they make their purchasing decisions in a completely different way than we did in the past, where it was just about buying a cheap dress from Zara for the weekend and then tossing it. So right. I think those are all interesting changes that are happening. And it means that we can move forward in a more positive direction now that sort of there's reopening and this new normal that we call.
Of course, and there's palpable progress. I mean, not only the fact that designers are pushing all these narratives forward, but also the fact that the mass market is adapting them as well, and therefore editorial companies are adapting it as well. So that in and of itself, the hardest barrier of entry has already been broken, because the hardest thing is to propose these new ideas that are good for society. And usually they get shut down by either the marketplace, because the marketplace is not educated enough or hasn't developed enough conscience to accept them, or the businesses close the doors because they are businesses and they focus on a market-based way of operating. So that in and of itself, and as you can say, it can only truly really improve from here, because once you've gotten over that point, it's just going to get more momentum. It's just going to get more awareness. More people are going to get into it. More designers are going to get into it. There's going to be more innovation from the aspect, and it's just going to be a sort of a snowball effect that can eventually reflect in aspects that we've discussed, not only the marketplace, but also companies and cultures having to adapt the way they operate because of the philosophy that has been standardized and just or globalized in that sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. The market and these innovators have pushed these ideas so much, and there's so much embracing from customers that the mainstream has had to adopt them. That's why now you will see vintage on the covers of sort of some of the most commercial magazines in the world that would never use vintage in the past. Or you see, I don't know, some celebrities renting clothes for the red carpet instead of getting custom made orders. In the past, rental was, people would roll their eyes and that it's sort of a cheap alternative to buying something brand new. There's a lot of mainstreaming of these good sustainable practices, which is really great.
Interesting. Wow, awesome, Nathalie. Well, just to wrap up this episode, I do want to end it with I always say it's a very cheesy question that I always ask, but it's a good question. I'm glad you think that. It is a hard question, so you are free to take as long as you need in order to answer it. Mm-hmm. But if you could ever go back to whatever point in your life you feel that you needed advice the most, what would be the biggest piece of advice that you'd give yourself and why?
Oh God, it is a very hard question. I guess I would go back to sort of those early days when I was starting my career and taking sort of my first full-time jobs, where it was a lot more difficult. I didn't feel as accepted. People were not as nice to me. And I think I would tell myself to, of course, be kind and polite and accommodating to people, but also to be a little bit more firm and to stand my ground. And not
Yeah,
try
just be
to
assertive.
please people, be more assertive and not try to please as much as I did in the past, which I thought is the best way forward. And I guess, and it came from a lack of confidence at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, my advice would be to be more assertive and more sort of to put boundaries, to put some stricter boundaries, and not compromise my mental health, my personal time, and all of that for the job. As much as I love and adore the fashion industry, I think that I could have had a better balance earlier on.
Right. What were the consequences of acting that way when you were starting out? Was it mostly emotional consequences, depressions, anxieties, insecurities? Was it literally just not having career opportunities, or opportunities present themselves that they could have or you could have taken? What was it? What happened? And like, what is like an example situation?
The result of it was, a lot of anxiety and a lot of unnecessary late nights and sleepless nights, or not sacrificing my personal life and my friends and time alone or with my family for a good few years at the beginning. That was sort of the consequence of it all. Which is okay when you're young and when you want something so badly. We do have to make sacrifices, absolutely. But sometimes if it's something avoidable, it's better to avoid it and to treat yourself with a little bit more compassion.
Okay. Awesome, Nathalie. Great. Wow. What a great conversation. I do want to just formally, before we wrap the episode, I do want to thank you, obviously, for being in the episode. I think that editorials specifically is something that is very, very, very scary from the outside in. It's such an important part of the industry, and it is a very, very intimidating part of the industry, especially for people that are looking at from the outside that don't really know how it operates. And I think it was a very good conversation helping, everybody sort of see the reality of how the industry functions and see that it's something that, although superficially it might be something intimidating, that it shouldn't be.
It shouldn't be. And it's not. Like, I think if you want to be part of it, just chase people, get in touch with people whose work you like and you admire, and there's always a way in.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Nathalie. Seriously, thank you for being on the episode.
Thank you so much for having me.
If you want to learn even more about how you can start your own fashion brand, make sure you follow me on YouTube at Esteban Julian. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of The Future of Fashion Business. Make sure you subscribe to listen to our future episodes.